Hello and welcome to another episode of Minnesota Liberty podcast sponsored by the Libertarian Party of Minnesota. I am one of your hosts, Rebecca Whiting, and we have this evening, normal TJ Hawthorne. So
it's morning here, but yeah.
yeah, you're on the other side of the world. I'm in, I guess it's not really frozen Minnesota right now because it's summer, but
yeah,
it's
same
a small
hemisphere,
window.
northern hemisphere, so we both are in summertime still, but yeah, it's 10 a.m. or 9:15 a.m. here in Tokyo, and I'm heading home today, so I'll be home tomorrow there, but it'll still be today. I love that travel back in time when I fly home, but it's been quite a fun trip this time. I one little quick story about maybe the culture differences, but I have this mug that my wife bought me for during my 2022 campaign. And when we parked at the parking ramp, which is a couple blocks away from our hotel, the first morning, I was trying to figure out how to pay for it at the kiosk. So I set it on top of the kiosk in this giant parking ramp and figured it out, paid, and then rushed to the car to get to the base. And then it wasn't until maybe 25 minutes into the drive to the base that I realized I didn't have my mug. And I just started freaking out and then realized, well, this is Japan, so we'll see. And sure enough, at 4:00 that afternoon, got back, and there it was, still sitting at the kiosk. I don't think you could leave one of these types of Yeti mugs, even though it's got my name on it. But I think there's a pretty good chance that any parking garage in America that would not be still sitting there. But I don't want to be chucking America under the bus. I just love the culture here in Japan. It's pretty sweet.
Well, they're trustworthy.
Yes, that's no doubt. There's a lot of honor here and integrity. And walking from the hotel to the parking ramp or walking all around during the morning, you see little kids. It's hard to tell their age, but they're just tiny little kids walking all by themselves, getting on the train, going to school, doing whatever. It's in this big old city, you definitely don't see that. Matter of fact, you're going to get Karens telling people and trying to get them sent to jail if they send their kids off all by themselves.
Yeah, I think I saw 2 cases in the last couple of weeks, both in Georgia, of like mom. And in one case, mom went to the store and told her kids, stay inside, be safe.
Yeah.
They're old enough to be on their own and, in their house. And one of them decided to take a bike ride outside. And the police showed up to her house and arrested her. Like,
and that's changed just in the last, in our generation. When we were kids, my mom used to send me at 5 years old with a letter to the 7-Eleven to the corner store to get her cigarettes.
to be able to buy them in.
Yeah, they didn't even look
restaurants.
So what's going on today? Well, what's been going on the last few days, and it seems like it's spreading similar to the 2020 Summer of Love, right? We have riots going on. In the name of ICE raids or illegal immigration, or however anybody wants to put it on either side. I think most of us in the Libertarian Party are kind of, I wouldn't say on the fence. I think a lot of folks have their own opinions on what's going on and what is justified and what is not. I think most of us hate the feds, so whatever the feds do is not legitimate in our minds. But what I see happening is not necessarily protests against this federal government bullshit. I think it's bullshit that they're destroying property and hindering people's movement around the city and things like that. I don't think any of those folks are our friends. And I think a friend of mine, Nate from Good Morning Liberty, put it really well recently in a post. And I really want to read it because it really did move me, what he said. And it really made a lot of sense. And I don't want to take up all the time here, Rebecca, but I just really... So this is what Nate from Good Morning Liberty said. I refuse to pretend that as a libertarian, I share common cause with the protesters and rioters in LA. Sure, I hate feds too, but do they? These anti-authoritarianism or anti-fascism protesters didn't block traffic during COVID lockdowns. They don't care that the government takes 3 months of your income every year, or that they'll seize your house if you fail to pay the yearly rent called property taxes.
Mhm.
They aren't protesting licensing requirements for Americans who want to start small business. And they don't care that the federal government is destroying our currency and robbing from our grandchildren in the process. These same anti authoritarian protesters would gleefully cheer on the ATF as they came and seized your guns. They blame you that the ATF blame you if the ATF ended your life. They'd happily watch the FBI arrest you for posting the wrong thoughts online. These same people, if empowered, would outlaw wealth creation and jail the rich, and they decided not to kill and jail the rich that they decided not to kill in the streets. They'd force you to pay any number of luxuries they've decided are human rights and be fine watching you rot in jail for refusing to pay taxes. They don't care about the founding fathers or the Constitution. They don't want limited government and certainly don't care about democracy. They want to destroy the entire system and ruin it by their own authoritarian ideals. These people are not my friends and they are not yours either. That shit, I mean, Nate really put it perfectly right there, man. It's like, I freaking get it. I'm frustrated too. I think that the federal government overreach is ridiculous and we got to stop it somehow. But I don't think that that's what this is.
No, I think that they're just fighting for their version of government.
Yes.
That's really what it is. It's just it's the pendulum swing back and forth. And there's very typically, and I think that we saw this in the Minneapolis riots too, right? Like
Yeah.
well, actually, I'm gonna take that back. I think that was a little different, because that was sparked by, a video in a time where the lockdowns, the masking, the fear mongering, all of that kind of stuff was just kind of at a peak, and we'd been living that way at that point for several months. And so it was just kind of a tinderbox already.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, maybe I don't live in LA, so I guess I don't know, like on the ground, what it's like. But LA does have a very heavy Hispanic population. I'm just kind of trying to put myself into like the people's shoes that may be doing this for the right reasons, but ultimately, and I think this is what kind of where I was getting at with the Minneapolis stuff, is that there were people that were rioting in bad faith. Like the people that were destroying the businesses, that were wrecking people's livelihoods, that were like doing, these kinds of things. This wasn't a cry of desperation because there's better ways to go about that. And, you can't, well, I take that back. A person who is internally peaceful is going to outwardly react in a different way. They're not going to just instantly turn violent. There's got to be, I don't know. But
no, I think we're the same. I think you're nailing it. I think exactly that we are peaceful people, but we have potential to be violent, but it's going to take something that's legitimately against me or against my principles that is going to allow that. And I have to be convinced, right? I believe a lot of this is manufactured consent, right? With this Palantir crap coming on, and you see all these folks pushing this stuff where mass surveillance, and it's like, where have we seen this before? I think,
same boss, just like the new boss, same like as the old boss. Like all it is this is a power struggle. Blue team doesn't want red team to be in the seat. Red team doesn't want blue team to be in the seat. The only team that's trying to save your future is the yellow team, who just wants to destroy the seat, make it so that there is no seat to fight over. Like literally, that's what's going on.
No doubt, man. I love having those conversations with some of my commie friends on the Facebook. As like these people need to pay taxes. They're not following the laws. They should this. It's like, but the laws and then the lawmakers are the ones that are the ones at fault, in my opinion, because they create this law that creates that division.
Yeah, well, and here's the problem when you get to the point of rioting, is that the time for being able to have a rational discussion is over.
Yep.
Like we're past that. This is a survival struggle. Really, that's what this is at this point. And I think this is like it's a lesson for us that in times where there is, okay, so there's something I want to kind of explain first. When I was in the Army, my NCO was always very clear, like, and I was in the Army from 2000, before 9/11, during all the deployments, that kind of stuff. But, he had been in the Army for a lot longer than that. And was very clear that there is absolutely no such thing as peace. We don't live surrounded by humanity ever. Like, peace is just such a false sense of security. You're in either war or you're in preparation for the next war. And I think that if you really took a realistic, you were willing to look at something, the situations, history, realistically, like, that's what you see. There's no peace.
I don't know, though. I don't think I think they're all a bunch of false flags. I mean, every single one of these conflicts that we've had in our history have been created by a false flag, by someone.
Well, that's what I mean is like that all this, the circumstances that build up to, for instance, just like the rioting, these all happened during times of, not chaos and destruction. You know what I mean? So, like, there's a time for being able to have rational and realistic policy, times where we need to be able to, take down the regulation, the government, not like, like overthrow, but I mean, kind of maybe, but like pull things back in a way that's slow and fair and, peaceful, but revolution isn't peaceful. So, like, all of these things that had to have happened for the riots happened during a time of not being riots, is what I'm trying to say. So, like, the time of being able to they're not in a time of being able to address this rationally, because they're surrounded by the hysteria. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Sure. I mean, and I think the social media influencers and who knows, and, anybody's going to do something for a buck, I suppose. Everybody has their price of however they want to be persuaded into saying or doing something that they maybe normally wouldn't do. And, the folks that have that kind of funds to create that influence can then, hey, find these folks and say, hey, I'll give you this. I don't know. This is how I kind of assume that it happens, right? You find these influencers, and because you can see some of the folks that I've been following on the social media change their tune or kind of say a different thing, and kind of where it's like, what are you trying to poke at here? And then they just constantly, and then the repetition of the message and the narrative. And then, all these folks, you talk about Palestine and Israel, and you've got absolutely two sides of the fence there, where, hey, they're just hiding all their children and people in the churches and in the hospitals, so that's why we got to bomb the hospitals. And then, hey, they're got us captive, and this is all we have, our churches and hospitals left to live in. I don't know. Ultimately, really, USA needs GTFO. You know what I mean?
Well, okay. So are we still talking about the riots? Are we talking about Palestine?
I know. Well, it's all kind of, you're right. It's all kind of the mind F. You know what I mean? Where folks are just getting so motivated to create this destruction because of what they've been told, when the other folks on the other side are thinking the same thing, and they're all just being falsely, they're ingesting this false narrative.
Yeah, well, here's ultimately the core of every single problem that we face. Every single one. We live in humanity is flawed and fallen. There's not even good people can fall victim to acting irrationally given the right circumstances, right? So there's that, but then there's also the people who are just in this for bad reasons. They are there just to fan the flames, just to provoke people into doing things that they probably would never have considered doing otherwise, manipulate the situation, cause chaos and destruction. And, they are absolutely doing this on purpose. And I think that in every situation, and including the LA riots, that's going to be ultimately like why it's it keeps going. That maybe there were good things, reason there are people that were having a hard time with that, the deportations and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there are good people getting swept up into that unfairly,
Absolutely.
and that is happening also. But you do their stories an injustice when you start destroying people's, acting in a way
Property.
that's, yeah, and just acting with chaos. Like, you can't, so then you have to weed out the good from the bad, but there's so much bad that the good gets overlooked. And the
Yes.
people who need it, the injustice that's actually happening, you can't focus on that because you're literally fighting, survival mode. So,
You got it.
um,
I totally agree. And just like, Dirty Laundry by Don Henley. Everybody loves to see the dirty laundry. Now everybody loves to see the chaos. So that's what we keep seeing on the news and on the media and all this stuff. So yeah, you're not going to see the folks that are volunteering at the food shelves or doing good stuff that actually is rebuilding the community. You're going to see all
yeah,
the terroristic BS, and then that just fuels that fire of rage against whatever faction that you want to be against. And
mhm,
how many, we're all tribalistic. We pick a side, and then you stick your flag in that side, and then
yeah,
all of a sudden, what does it take to then change your mind? Because man, you and I both have been stuck our flag into some side, and then realized the truth and said, God damn, I was an idiot or something, where and I'm sorry for everything that I've said back in the day or whatever the case. And keeping an open mind and thinking of, a peaceful way to figure shit out is my goal.
yeah, yeah. And so we have the LA riots, and that's, I mean, I was watching video of it today, and it's hard to know, in a day and age where everything is so fake and manipulated.
Oh,
How do you? So I don't know. I'm kind of taking all of it with a grain of salt.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. You go ahead. Yeah, you
yeah,
gotta.
yeah. And then, but on the other side of that, let's just, I guess we'll shift gears, talk about what's happening on the other side of the world, because this is significant also. So at the same time, we have this going on in the United States, and then we have Israel, who is threatening to bomb Iran.
Yeah,
And I don't know if you know it, but that's kind of a big deal.
a little bit.
Um, with us being allies with Israel, then the question becomes, are we going to get pulled into a war, even a proxy war? Are we going to be supplying arms to Israel so that they can fight a war with Iran that they started? And you can argue about the history of the geography, the countries and that kind of stuff. But, in I don't think any of that matters, because the people on the morning that decide to wake up, they're like, all right, I'm going to wake up this morning and I'm going to push the buttons that blow up, that start the bombs, that start this war. That was a decision that they made. And, you got to figure out, and I don't, there's probably no figuring out. Like, if there was going to be peace in the Middle East, it would have happened by now, to some degree. And we know how much of a disaster it is. So if it's inevitable that this was always going to be the case, the best thing that we can do is just throw our hands up and be like, we're just going to protect our borders, build this up, take care of our own, and stay out.
And likely have to deal with whatever blowback happens. You know what I mean? Because that's what is likely going to happen, especially because we have such a diverse country. Of every single other country in the world has some kind of citizen living here, whether they're legal or not,
Mhm.
and so they're going to probably take offense to whatever's happening in their home country to their brothers and sisters,
Yeah,
and have
that's
some
their
retaliation.
responsibility. That is not the U.S. government's responsibility, and the U.S. government's responsibility is to Americans first.
You got it. Yeah,
I mean,
that's the
even people who have come to this country and become Americans, we have their responsibility to the government, and I think the sole responsibility of the government is to make sure that we don't, at the very least, we're not picking fights that we can't see through. And we shouldn't be that country that's just going to go and then how, you know, the last few years we've been lectured on how awful Russia is for invading Ukraine and blah blah, but how any different is the United States?
No doubt.
What we did in other countries, like literally no different.
The hypocrisy is so real, and that's this type of stuff that woke me up, right? To then realize and put yourself in someone else's shoes. It's that easy. Just be a little empathetic about what in the world is that person going through, and try and chat or try and figure it out and try and see why would that person act that way. Well, would I act that way if all of a sudden I'm walking down the road and my brother and dad just got blown up by something? I look up in the sky and I see an American drone or Israeli drone, or, and then the other part is, and what's really changed my mind over the years, just the past couple years, is learning all the different false flags, like I was saying before, that I truly believe that this was the case. And then it's literally documented and it's out in the open, but it's just not a common narrative, that Gulf of Tonkin. And, I don't think a lot of folks still believe in, a lot of folks do believe in the original 9/11 narrative, but I completely sold that is not even close to what happened. And think of all the stuff that came after that. And then that just spreads into all this other blowback and all this other crap that we're dealing with.
I'm going to address something very important real quick, just to take a break.
The Farm Fest or yellow?
No. Are we team yellow or team gold?
That's a great question. I don't really know. I mean, sometimes you gotta go with the yellow, but I think gold is good, but the yellow color really sticks out. And so when you're talking ANCAP, I guess that's definitely a yellow and black symbology there. But
I guess it's hard to have the metallic, like sheen on a flag. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Symbolism and all that stuff and the collectivism stuff, to me, it's crap, man. We're all individuals. And yes, I still like to represent and I will. And definitely when you're talking war and things like that, or you're talking these conflicts and you see flags flying here and there, well, that's a determination of what effing team that you're on, right? I guess.
I don't think that's the answer he was looking for.
Well, I guess I don't know then.
No, I was just like a little lightheartedness. And anyways, sorry.
My bad.
It's because you're bald. There was no it couldn't slow down the
just
thought.
cut my hair.
As far as there is a question, will I be at Farm Fest this summer? I don't know yet.
When is it? When and where?
I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know that either. So we have talked about it, but there's no nothing firm at this moment.
I'm actually
I love going to Farm Fest because it's like you have like the dairy tent and you can go and like talk to like dairy farmers and like, and like that's my love language. So
sure. But and then how do you feel though? I mean, isn't like the corporation and the corporatism of a lot of that farming
problematic, obviously, but that's the farmers, the family farmers are not the ones that are the problem. And so, and I have, we're talking about the end of the world and World War III and Palestine and LA. Right? So I could very easily get off on this topic. Man, that's a tangent that would take up at least 20 minutes, but.
Well, hey, whatever's, I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this. I have a question for you. I saw a post, and I guess I'm not going to name where I saw the post, but that, we have to do something about terrorism, and that we would that was the nature of the post, is that the United States has an obligation to do something about terrorism and to stand firm against terrorism. And do we?
What is terrorism?
Yeah, I guess that's the question. Like in their mind, what is terrorism? So if terrorism is simply an act of terror, which I don't know, like if you're stealing somebody's things or if you're murdering somebody, that's by definition, that's, causing terror. So, but if it's another country, a group of people in another country acting that way against Americans, then you label it terrorism. And that's kind of like this trigger word to get people all hysterical. Oh, it's terrorism. No, it was murder. Like in any other prior to 9/11, well, maybe even before that, would we have always just called that murder, or I don't know. It's just, how is it different? But by calling it like an act of terrorism, I feel like that makes people like turn to the government and be like, the government has to do something about this. How dare they, like, hurt American citizens, or, do something up. But does the American government have an obligation to act against terrorism? I don't think they do. I think that a strong defense of the United States is our best offense. And that by just making our country strong, but internally, like, that's where the border stuff would be important. And while I disagree that like going through door and not, door by door and throwing out the illegals or people who are, whatever. Maybe that's not a good tactic, or, there's a lot of nuance and, moving parts of that we can argue about later. But the best thing that we can do for the United States isn't act as offensively to another country when they do something that we don't like to American citizens, but is to just keep our country strong here.
Well, ultimately, yeah. I mean, that's the collectivist stuff that I really can't get behind, is that to say, okay, this group of 5 or 10, maybe even 20 to 50 individuals came and conducted this act of terrorism against the U.S. And, 50% of them were from Saudi Arabia, but hey, there were 3 or 4 of them from Afghanistan. That whole country's, we got to go invade.
Were there any of the 9/11?
No, I don't know. I'm just
I don't think there were. I think they were all.
I don't think any of them were from Afghanistan or Iran.
No. The Taliban wasn't on airplanes blowing up. Well, that was the Saudis, and then anyways.
None of it makes sense, right? And then where I ask, what is terrorism? Because just like we were saying before, what the heck is America doing on the other side of the world conducting all this terrorism? And fact check, terrorism is when you do something the government doesn't like, and I think that nailed it, right? I think that's
I mean, they would call us domestic terrorists. I mean, honestly, because we speak out against the government, and we're probably on a list someplace.
We just don't have that power to really make them give a shit too much. We're just
not yet.
Not yet.
When they do, or when we do, I mean, they would absolutely not feel compelled to just let you be. They wouldn't feel that at all. They would actively seek you out aggressively and try to silence your dissension. Like that's what the U.S. government does to citizens who are outspoken against the U.S. government.
Yep.
So, I mean, we have a long history of that in the United States, too.
You got it. Yeah. Like him or not. I mean, Jeremy Kauffman a couple of years ago or just last year had the FBI show up at his house because of a dang face or X post. And I mean, it's happening all over in the UK. US is a little different, obviously, in our laws. And some of the cops will realize that, okay, we're restrained by something here called the Constitution. But a lot of them throw that shit right out the window and, try to manipulate and have you start barking your mouth off to then self-incriminate, and say the wrong thing. So then they can, I don't know. It's an endless fiasco here when we're talking about how to be peaceful and how to then figure this out, where what has gone wrong and why are people being so violent? Again, I believe there's a lot of manufactured consent here going on. I think there's folks lighting the fire in the back of the house and selling that fire extinguisher in the front, man. And just, I heard that quote just today and I'm loving it. I think that's perfect. I mean, that to me explains a lot of this stuff. And I'm convinced that there are entities in this country that, hey, they either profit from it or, like you said, sit back and watch and love the chaos. And they're just doing it to us and laughing the whole way home.
Yeah. You're never going to be allies with those people.
No, they're not my friends. And I know they're not yours either. Speaking of, and then so not being able to, tell the real from the fake, holy cow, this AI videos have really taken over, haven't they? I mean,
I saw something today. I can't even remember where I saw it. But it was just an example. And it was an example of like a couple of it was a series of 3 reporters in
Yes.
different situations in the background, and then something crazy would happen. Like in one of them, it was standing in front of the ocean, and then the kraken like jumped out of the waves, and then
Yep.
another one, like
The
an
giant shark in the
alien,
flood, and then the
yeah,
alien came out. I
yeah,
saw
and
it.
an alien. Do you saw that too? And there was one of them that looked pretty realistic, but there were other part elements of the other 2 where I was like, oh, that's obviously fake. However, I recently had an interaction with somebody who was in their 70s ish that just could not understand like how the internet works, basically. And so, I mean, while maybe like you and I are not going to fall for that, or at least be suspicious.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Always.
Maybe there is, what, yeah, what would be awful is if there is actually an alien invasion and we are so accustomed to being like,
Yes.
oh, that's not real, that nobody takes it seriously. And then we're all like, psh, dust, I don't know. Maybe that could happen.
Holy cow!
Um,
That makes so much sense.
yeah. But, we have, not everybody is like us. And so you have entire generations, entire groups of people that take this as gospel. And that's terrifying. Like in itself, that's equally as scary.
Yeah, yeah. Like, so these Bigfoot and Yeti videos have been popping up, like filling my feed. I don't know, and probably because I keep clicking on them because they're funny as hell. And I just laughing at some of the shit that they're doing, all this booger sugar and freaking mushrooms and all this stuff on these videos. And then it wasn't until one of the guys that I follow that he talks a lot of good common sense, and he was like, what the heck is up with these dang videos? They're getting away with shit that I could never do. I can't even smoke cigarettes on TikTok. I can't do, and they're doing coke and blowing up helicopters. And so that makes me really think about it, right? Like, okay, so now if it's AI, they can get away with this stuff and just keep posting this stuff because they're not a real human. That made me really think about what's real, because these folks that are content creators are trying to tell the truth, and whatever, they get banned because the dude smokes a cigarette on the video, and nope, that video is gone. And so he's got to repost another one without a cigarette. But then the Bigfoot can hold up a whole bag of blow or a big bag of mushrooms and eat. I mean, I don't know. There's just all kinds of interesting dynamic there of who's controlling the media. And I don't even know what
It
to think
makes
about
me
it.
wonder too, like, have we just become so soft that you're
Oh,
not even allowed to have a video of somebody smoking a cigarette anymore?
yes.
That's become offensive. I mean, if that's where we're headed, maybe we deserve to be blown up. I mean, that's just I mean, if that's really the case, I maybe there are times where there's a part of me that's like, like, we do all this, do so much stuff, try to, send out the message, talk to people, get people, change the culture, always try and do this stuff. And it just feels like you're not making any progress, like there are just things that are too big to overcome. And oops, sorry, I bonked the computer. But then, there's always that like little part in the back of my mind going, well, maybe it's best if we just like go home and become reclusive and just, build ourselves up and wait for the fall just so that we can like live through it. Like, I mean, is it inevitable, or is there something left to save, or is it even deserving of saving? I don't know.
That's a great thought. And I think about that quite a bit. Where is it? I'm very envious of the Whiting family that has this acreage in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota, where that's like, I want to find something like that. And then I can turn it on until it all goes to shit, and then it goes away. But I still have what's mine,
I
and
gotta tell you, when you have a farm, you are too busy to care what your neighbors are doing.
good. Yes, exactly. And that's likely why most rural America believes in that, believes in what libertarians truly believe. A lot of them are sold in the fact that, oh no, you need to take care of those idiots and those, back in the day. I don't know how you're not originally from Minnesota, but a lot of rural folks in Minnesota would call the city folk the 612ers. I don't give a shit what those 612ers are doing. Those are damn 612ers coming up in here. and I get it, and they'd rather just be left alone. And I think a lot of Americans are that way, where if they don't live in the city, and then that city that, you know, where where there's 40 people occupying 2 square feet of land, right? The land here is only 2 square feet, but you got 40 people because it's all going up, right? And then you
That's
spread that
insane.
out. Huh?
Yeah, that's crazy. I saw something today, and I don't remember where I saw it. It was another one of those, like, it popped up in my on my algorithm on social media. But it was a high-rise building, and I think it was in Bangkok, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a high-rise building. I can't remember how many stories it had, but it was a lot. It was a significant amount, right? And that one building could house 20,000 people. So that the people on the upper levels, they had their grocery stores, they had their, everything that they needed on their level of this huge high-rise building. They would literally go months or years without ever going back down to the ground.
Ugh.
Can you, I mean, just that's so different than the way that we live. Like I just go outside barefoot and like put my toes in the dirt, like I gotta feel the ground,
You got it.
But just that amount of people in such a small compact area, that's the entire town of Bemidji with 5,000 uninhabited homes, basically, of that still is in that high rise. We'd only take up 75% of it, less than that.
And it'd only, take up this much square footage of Earth. Because then you go into the sky, and that I forgot what the term is, where we're compounding or stacking up folks like that, and then you have to you don't have your own personal property. And then once you don't have your own personal property, you don't care about personal property. And then it takes one generation to two to then forget about what personal property is and how important it is to earn this stuff and to have this stuff and to have your own wealth and not. Well,
I mean, if that's important to you, but I don't feel like you have to put a lot of value in wealth, financial wealth or material things. Like, so, I mean, it's kind of just depends on, I guess, on your perspective. I don't think it's a wrong way of living as long as it's voluntary. Like, people can decide to live that way. I think I would have a hard time getting accustomed to it. Because I need to be, like my trees and my grass and my garden and that kind of stuff. Like I don't know if I could keep a cow in a high rise building, but maybe that's how maybe they have them. I don't know.
Well, I'm looking across right now, and there are soccer fields on top, and I'm 12 floors up, and I'm looking across at kids playing on a soccer field on the 12th floor with a few little trees and a garden and stuff right on top of the 12th floor of that building over there. And so sometimes that's maybe you think about a lot of these countries where I've visited in Japan and Korea, where they've got quite a population, but it is a small country. And then you get there and there's all kinds of countryside. So where are all these folks? Yes.
Well, kind of. I mean, have you ever been to Korea?
Yeah, many times.
Okay. So like Korea is, but I mean, you've been there. So, like there's not really, I mean, you have a little bit of space, but like the drive from at least Seoul to the North Korean border is just basically nonstop people.
But that's not very far. You go south of Seoul, like I've driven from Seoul all the way down to the tip of the country where Kunsan Air Base is, and I'm driving in the highway, and it's all kinds of countryside, all kinds of green land.
That wasn't the part of Korea I went to.
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting to think about this, but then when you do see the small towns of Osan or, anyways, I can't remember all the names. There you see high-rise buildings, and everybody lives in these tall buildings. And not everybody. You drive around Tokyo, and you can see single-family homes that are 2 stories, and here and there. And yes, it's concrete jungle for quite a while. I mean, Tokyo is a massive city of just city.
Yeah.
And they'll get in their trees wherever they can. But you go outside and there's all kinds of countryside and green places that you can enjoy. So like I said, maybe it's voluntary, but I think it could be just it takes just a couple generations to then force that voluntarism, you know what I mean? Where all of a sudden it's like, well, this is the way it is. I don't know. It's a hard one for me and for you too. And I think, like you said,
well, but I think that there's ties that bind people to their culture and their family that are like, they've never considered. It's not, while they may not have made a conscious decision to get where they are, it is how they were, what they were born into, and they've accepted it, and it's normal for them.
yeah.
So if they had the freedom to leave, which, I mean, there's other things in, when you're trying to like shift a culture, then that's a little different. But I think then like government overreach. But anyways, there is and I know you have to go soon, but there is a question on here, and I wanted to address. So, what are your views on the administration arresting pro-Palestinian legal permanent residents? And this one is, for me, is actually fairly cut and dry. Is very black and white. I think that they shouldn't be.
Exactly. Yeah.
You have
Okay.
a right to be able to like speak out and to say how you feel, and with the way that you view things, as long as you're doing something in a peaceful manner, then the government has absolutely no right to tread on your liberties, especially your freedom of speech. And I don't think that that's just an American thing. I think that's a humanity thing. This is a human right that was written down as part of the Constitution for the United States. But that regardless of whether you are an American or you're somebody else, and I don't know, I mean, maybe that's a gray area. Like if somebody else comes to our country and protests within our country, then different, maybe. But I think it would depend on how they're doing it. As long as they're doing that peacefully. If somebody's visiting and they're like, hey, I disagree that this is right, I don't know.
No,
but
I figure
permanent residents that went through the process and became a permanent resident, that's a pretty shallow, crappy reason to take somebody's residency and to just basically alter the future of their life because they decide to speak out in something that I would probably agree. Bombing Gaza is a bad idea.
Man,
Carpet bombing Gaza. Why wouldn't we be speaking out about that?
well, a lot of folks are, and a lot of folks are waking up to this, man. I swear I was a libertarian before I realized what the heck is going on with Israel and Gaza, and then really waking up to that. It's just reinforcing all my thoughts of, freedom of movement and all this stuff and the stuff that is happening there. But again, I do take that with a grain of salt because I don't know who's telling me the truth, but I think it's quite obvious that what the truth is. And I think that taking the stance of Israel by our government and then going after someone that just because they're pro-Palestinian protesters, that is totally wrong. I think it's absolutely wrong that our government is taking a stance on some other country's views while harassing or detaining or arresting and removing an actual citizen that has gone through whatever legal process they have. Now, again, full circle back to this ICE raid stuff. Again, I think it's quite fake, but if the U.S. government wants to eliminate the folks that just, I don't even know how they could go about this peacefully. You know what I mean? I don't know how.
I think it's too late for peace. Peace would have had to have, things would have happened already at this point. I mean, once you cross that line, it's really hard to take it back and to, pull things back and move forward in peace when you've already descended to chaos.
And we were really young. We were really young in the 80s when Reagan actually did some kind of a mass amnesty thing. There was quite the rush across the borders back in the 80s as well. And there was this kind of a conflict, I guess, not maybe this as bad, but there was a lot of stuff going on in the media as far as I can tell. You know what I mean? Like I said, I was young. I was definitely not paying attention to this stuff. But I do believe that Reagan did have this mass amnesty. And then now it's almost like, do we do this again? Where, okay, similar to thing like the once the government decides they're going to do this process, well, then you incentivize all these bad actors to then push for it to happen again. The way I see it, I mean, it's
so the Reagan amnesty. It was the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, a piece of legislation signed into law by President Reagan, provided a path of legal residency for a large number of undocumented immigrants who had entered the United States prior to January 1st, 1984. Anyways, so I don't know why we're not pursuing that. Like, why isn't that being pursued? And just, it seems like that would be an easier and cheaper option to go forward than to just keep shipping people. And,
as long as these borders are then secure, right? As long as then we don't just keep allowing it, because we're incentivizing folks. You can't have mass immigration with the welfare state that we have.
Right.
That ultimately, I think all libertarian, well, okay, not all libertarians, but if we're going to believe that people have that freedom of movement, they've got to earn their freaking way. You know what I mean? You can't just be sucking off the teat if you're just going to walk into our country and then take something that I earned. That
it shouldn't even be available. I mean,
there you go. Exactly.
Really what it comes down to. I think that having that process like it is, that, I mean, humanity, as we've already discussed, is just kind of like this flawed group of people. And so that if there is something that incentivizes people to come, obviously people are going to come and take advantage of it.
Yep.
However, at the same time, when you have a whole bunch of people that are coming here because of wars in their country, or they're seeking asylum for political persecution, or, whatever it is, and they're coming to the United States to seek, the American dream. Anyways, we're not going to talk about the American dream. That's another tangent. But, they're seeking like a future where they're allowed to make their own decisions in a way that they weren't allowed to in their own country. You also, at the same time, have to have a system that people can easily navigate. And we don't have that either. The immigration system is extraordinarily expensive. It's complicated. And there's a reason why people that have been there for 20, 30 years haven't been able to overcome it. So when people are coming here, sometimes with only what is on their backs, and then we say, here's this massive bill that you have to take on to be able to become an American citizen, for people that don't have anything, we're forcing unrealistic expectations.
You got it.
So we simultaneously, there's a lot of things that need to happen. The welfare system needs to be reeled back. I think that if we're going to have like, obviously the red team and the blue team, they're not anti-welfare. And so if we're going to have it there, but there's got to be a way that where people aren't stuck on it for life. Like, at the very least, that's what's got to happen. But that the laws are also easy to navigate and understand, and that the laws that we are asking them to overcome are good laws. Like, just all of this has to happen at the same time. But the people who are causing this hysteria and causing this disruption and causing the disagreements and, like, blowing it up to where it is now, they have absolutely no incentive to fix a broken system whatsoever, because they're capitalizing off of it for their own benefit. That's what's happening.
All in the name of hating capitalism too. Weird. I mean, I know that has nothing to do with real capitalism, but the thing is that they're hating on. It's like a Marxist thing, as a oppressor versus oppressed versus oppressor, and they don't give a shit about the property. They don't give a shit about the other side or what's really right. I don't know. I really got to go, though. We've really mashed out 50 minutes really quick.
Yeah, that happens.
I got to get moving, get on the train, and head to...
And I got to get back to work.
All right. Well, this has been great.
Is calling my name, so I took a break to do it. But just real quick, if you're interested in joining the party, finding out more information about us, try to keep an open mind. I think that, when you talk about libertarianism, there's a lot of new things that you have to be open to hearing, and a lot of deprogramming because that's, what the propaganda machine has been dumping out for a long time. So we offer something alternative, and if you are like, hey, this doesn't seem right, let's have that discussion. If there's one thing that libertarians are really great at, it's debating and talking. So, things that a lot of people are like, oh, you're not allowed to talk about that. Well, anyways, so lpmn.org, if you want to get in touch, info@lpmn.org. You can go up to the website. There's membership. You can donate, find an affiliate, an event in your area. And if you don't see an affiliate in your area, we're always looking for people to start new ones. So get in touch. We can tell you how, and start your own libertarian group. But that's all we got for this evening. And next week, I really actually would like to talk about farm stuff, because some things happen in the state that are like, that's not right.
Yes. Sure oh man, there was some closed door stuff going on. Yes. And we didn't even get
the Attorney General said that farming is not a constitutional right in Minnesota. And I completely disagree, because, by the way, it's in our Constitution, Minnesota. And he just obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. So
next week, we're all over that for sure.
Yeah.